don't let the shame of staying away keep you from the magic of returning. Hello, sunshine, and welcome back to Paradigm Shift with I Understood, a place where we reframe what is and reimagine what could be. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Let's paradigm shift together. Hello, darlings, and welcome back. Please forgive the background noise on today's episode. Such is the human experience. Today, I'm very excited to be talking to you about the power of returning, the power of recommitment. And the specific pain that I want to speak to today is when you told yourself or others in your life that you were going to do something, and maybe you even started it, but then you stopped. You stopped the path that you were on, you took a break, and the break extended, and now you feel ashamed. You feel ashamed for avoiding the creative project. And now your avoidance is compounded by your shame. You're not just avoiding the fear of the project itself, which is inherently fearful, whether that is writing, podcasting, speaking, creating something, but you're also avoiding the shame you feel at having said you would do something and then not doing it, whether that's the breaking of the commitment to yourself or the public statement that you made to others. So I have experienced this many times. Most prominently, when I started my podcast, I told myself, okay, I'm going to do this every single week. And then after about 5 weeks, I stopped for 6 months. And within those 6 months, there were many opportunities that I could have taken to return to the project, to the page. I just like saying the page because it sounds sexier, but to return to the page. And out of the shame that I felt at avoiding it for so long, I didn't return. And what I want to really invite us into is the perspective that commitment is only one thing. I think something that's even more profound is recommitment, because the commitment happens first. It's what you say, okay, I'm committed to this project. But what's going to happen when you break that commitment? That's when you have two decisions. You have the decision to say, oh, I broke the commitment. That's it. Or you have the choice to say, I'm recommitting. And I think if we practice the skill of forgiving ourselves and recommitting constantly, knowing we have a path that we've laid out for ourselves. It's a linear path. It assumes that we're going to be able to be consistent, or we're going to be able to literally, as I said in the last episode, to be this mechanized self that is so productive and that is so consistent and that is so predictable and static rather than dynamic and emotional and evolving and seasonal. I think within that, we need to invite ourselves into the idea that this path is going to be deviated from, but what matters is that we are going to recommit to it again and again and again. And this also describes how I feel about my relationship with TikTok, where it's a constant, I don't want to call it a fight, but it's a constant decision to decide to recommit to that platform, because very often I feel very perturbed by it, or it's just a precarious place to create content because you never know what's going to happen. You could go negatively viral. It's just weird that you have to keep proving yourself again and again. Your people who follow you may not even see what you post. It's just so strange to me. But I choose to recommit to it because there's something in it for me there. I feel like it's a beautiful way to connect with people. I feel like I am proud of the social movement that it describes or that it epitomizes. I love the ripple effect of that TikToks have had on my own life. I like the vibe and the energy, and I just feel like I've built an audience that I feel devoted and committed to, but then it's weird that they may not even see what I post. So anyways, so that's an example for me of recommitment, where I set these goals, I don't reach them. I say once a day, 3 times a day, 5 times a day, 10 times a day, and then I don't reach them. But then what do I refuse to do is I refuse for too long. This happens all the time, to let the shame of not doing what I said I would do stop me from returning to that platform. And although I say that I refuse to do that, what often happens is that is exactly what happens. What happens is that I say I'm going to do something, I don't do it, and then I feel ashamed, and then I avoid it because of the shame that I feel. So I just want to invite us into this perspective on the power of return. Think of all the examples in nature of return, the cyclicality, the idea of seasons, the idea of orbits, the idea of life stages and development stages, and how the first kind of mirrors the end, like the beginning of life and the attributes of being vulnerable and dependent on others mirrors the end of life. There's a lot of cyclicality, there's a lot of returning, okay? We think of the new year, the earth orbiting and completing its cycle, returning to where it once was. And what we can learn from this imagery of return is that this should also apply to our creative lives. The idea that it's not really only about the fact that you left, it's about the fact that you returned. And this cyclicality is part of your being as nature, that there are seasons for things in your life. But let yourself come back to the summer. Don't say to yourself, oh, I stayed in winter, now all I deserve is winter. So now I'm just not going to be able to allow myself to create summer in my life. And this is a binary way of thinking. I think we fall into these traps of like, winter's bad, summer's good, dark is bad, light is good. But actually in nature, you need all of these things. You can't have the day without the night. You can't have growth without soil and dirt and mud. You can't have rest without night, without darkness. And yet darkness is demonized in our culture. We need darkness literally for life on earth. And yet we only see light as connected to the notion of life. It's so interesting. Yet we know that our rest fortifies our aliveness. It's the reason why we can stay alive, is because we rest and we restore and we heal and we conserve energy and we go through all these healing processes within our bodies and our cells while we sleep. And so it's an extremely generative and life-giving process, yet often the darkness is demonized. Now that's a whole different conversation, but all I want to say is allow yourself to be cyclical, which means allow yourself to return. If you feel ashamed that you didn't do what you said you would do, or you weren't as consistent as you said you would be, I would love if you would just invite yourself to say, and so then what? And so then what? That's the human experience, saying you're going to do something and not doing it. Okay? But then comes the choice. And I think we can learn so much from people who experience addiction on this idea of recommitment. If you are abstaining from alcohol, for example, and then you drink, okay, then you have two decisions. Either you can say, okay, I'm just going to keep drinking, or you can recommit to not drinking. So there's always that choice of, are we going to let this moment or this period of our lives define us for the rest of it? You know what I mean? And we're not defined by our actions. We're not defined by what we create. But I think you understand what I'm trying to say to you. I think in this world, we are often encouraged to see life as being short. Life is so short. You should do this and you should do that. But when it comes to wisdom, I really believe in the importance of contradiction as a form of truth. Saying that life is both short and long, to me, is much more honest than saying that life is short. Life is short in some ways, but life is also the longest thing that any of us could hope to experience. So that's the longness of life, that you have time. If there's something you've always wanted to do, or if there's a friendship you want to recover. Oh my word, that's such a beautiful departure that she just made. Let's talk about the shame of returning to a relationship or a friendship. The feeling of, oh, I didn't text them back for so long, so now I'm just not going to text them back at all. It's such a paradoxical and self-sabotaging, yet very, very like understandable, and I validate you, but it's such a self-sabotaging thing we do to ourselves, is we say, you know, I haven't reached out to her in so long, so I'm just going to not reach out to her for even longer because I'm ashamed. You know what I mean? Or I didn't respond for so long, so I'm just not going to respond ever. And it's out of shame. It's because when you open up that text, it reminds you. It says June 27th, 2023, or whatever. Even sooner, it says, you know, you are reminded by the shame of how long it's been since you last responded to that person. And that feels uncomfortable. But the discomfort of confronting that shame and moving through it, responding, reaching out, double texting, triple texting, whatever it takes, to reconnect with that person, to repair, to return, to recommit to the relationship. And all of the life that lies on the other side of that recommitment is so much longer than the shame that we're letting ourselves sit with instead. As in, it's so much more fruitful what we could allow ourselves to experience. Okay? So that in that way, life is long. That we have a lifetime to rebuild, to reconnect, to return. But we have to take the action towards that in order to experience a life on the other side. When we talk about return, we also have to remember that we're not regressing. That would only be the case if you viewed progress as linear. But we know that in nature, progress is never linear. Progress is cyclical. And I think the distinction between the way that Western views understand progress is it's very linear, whereas the natural earthly wisdom would be that progress is cyclical. It's more like a spiraling than it is a straight line. And so when we think of the fact that we return enriched by the experiences that we've had, then we start to see that it's not purely a loss. We haven't simply lost time, whether it's returning to a relationship or a creative project or something we said that we would do. There are things that we now know. And I mean that deeper knowing, that intuition, that experiential knowing, the knowing that is multidimensional. It's not just what you've read, but what you've come to understand, even about yourself. It's not just what you have studied, but what you've observed and felt and seen and heard, the rich kind of knowing that's all encompassing of all the knowledge that could possibly be classified as such. You come back to that relationship, you come back to that project with that new knowledge. And so in so doing, your rest was not simply a regression, because you're enriched by the life you've lived since. You're going to come at the work with a certain kind of new perspective. And this happened to me when I returned to my podcast after a 6-month break, unintended break. I came with a new energy, I came fortified. I came ready to share my experiences with my difficulties on finding my voice, which is something that people ask me about, that I'm excited to keep digging deeper and deeper into, because it's something that I consistently face. So with that being said, I could say, I lost those 6 months. No, I was living a life. And as an artist, what's really cool is when you take on this identity of you are an artist. I believe that if you're listening to this, you're an artist. That means that your life, my therapist said this to me, your life is your art. Everything you're experiencing feeds your perspective and your consciousness. And that's the consciousness that you are creating from. Remember I said, paint the world with your consciousness. Well, if you're painting the world with your consciousness, then your consciousness is the I don't want to use the word resource, but it's like the paint. It's the material that you're drawing from and through and as. So the more you live a life, the more you are in deep attention to your life, the richer your palette and the richer the resources you can then draw from are. So I think when you take this break, intended or otherwise, it's not that it has absolutely no bearing on what you then are able to bring forth from you. Because it's like saying that the plant that just was rained upon and experienced different seasons is not now fortified by those experiences. So the key idea here is don't let the shame that you have of staying away keep you from the magic of returning. Do not let the shame of avoidance keep you from the joy, the magic, and the love of the return. Love yourself so much that you always view yourself as worthy of returning. And also love your audience or whoever you make things for that much. Because it's also such an act to the people you do things for to keep recommitting to doing it. That's what brings me back to TikTok again and again, is this idea that it transcends me. There are people on the other side who can benefit from what I'm saying. And that recommitment, that return is meaningful to them as well. And so commitment is not what defines us as artists, as people, as friends. What really defines a friendship or a relationship, a romantic relationship, is the fact that you recommit to them. You know what I mean? It's the fact that you keep choosing that person. You know, the people who are in love who say, I choose her every single day. I choose them every single day. Think about the recommitment involved. It's that when you fall off the choosing, you don't let that stop you from re-choosing. And so that beauty of recommitting, returning, cyclicality, orbiting, but returning to that, the new year, the cycle, the season, it comes back and it bears the fruit that it has to bear. I do want to give 2 examples from nature of processes that involve taking breaks and then returning. Let me quickly read to you these 2 examples from ChatGPT on beings in nature that take breaks from building things, because that's sexy and divine and delicious. The one is the construction of a beehive by bees. Honeybees construct their hives by producing beeswax and shaping it into into cells that are the shape of a hexagon. Bees take breaks for various reasons, including foraging for nectar and pollen, defending the hive, and resting. The construction of a beehive is an ongoing process that may take weeks or months. So in what way are you constructing a beehive that may take months, years? I mean, bees are a specific species. We exist on a different timeline. But I think from that metaphor, what we see is that this is an ongoing process that involves rest, foraging for nectar and pollen. If you've been focused on literally sustaining yourself in some way, that could be financially, emotionally, creatively. If you've been looking for something to sustain and enliven and fulfill you, then that's obviously going to take you away from constructing the beehive. The other example is defending the hive. If you've had to protect yourself from things, if you've had to be there for yourself emotionally and protect your energy and conserve your energy. That was my experience when I took my 6-month break off my podcast. I didn't have the energy to give to it. You know what I mean? I had to defend the other parts of my life that were seeking my energy and that were seeking actually to just dim my light in general. And resting just for its own sake. It's good to rest. That's what the beehives do. And look at them. They're thriving. Well, not in our world. Because of humans, but they would be thriving. Their process is a thriving process. Okay, the other example that I want to give is bird nest building. And aren't we all just building our little bird nest? And don't we deserve breaks along the way? Many bird species build nests in trees or shrubs. Nest construction involves collecting materials like twigs, leaves, and grass, and then arranging them into a nest. Birds may take breaks during this process, perhaps to find more materials or to feed themselves. They return to the nest building task when they have gathered enough resources or when they feel it is the right time to resume. This process can be interrupted and resumed multiple times until the nest is complete. I love that the birds just know when it's time to resume. Like, be like the birds, babe. Be like the birds. When is it like maybe you just know on a subconscious level that it wasn't the right time to build the nest? And something that I want to say to you is I want to empower you to understand that you are connected to intelligences that are greater than you, that you haven't been invited to see yourself as connected to. And so your subconscious you is part of you, and your subconscious you may be taking this time away because it knows that it wasn't the right time for that project, or maybe for that friendship, or for that thing that you've been avoiding. But now the avoidance may be a symbol, or the shame you feel at the avoidance may be a signal from that same subconscious you, but you've prolonged the rest, the break, longer than what it needed to be. That may be the case. I'm not interpreting it for you, but it may be the case that the now agitation, it's energy. Everything is energy. So if you feel agitated by the fact that you've taken so long, use that energy. Use that energy to fuel you towards the return. Don't turn the energy towards shame. Turn it towards returning, forgiving, acknowledging this is part of the journey. This is part of the human experience, is saying you're going to do things and not doing them, and then deciding to recommit to doing them. Rinse, repeat. That's what we're going to be living, babe. And when you're aligned to a craft, like it's like an athlete, they're aligned to a way of existing in the world and all of the systems that entails. So it doesn't matter if they miss an off day or an off week. They're going to return because that's their identity. And I think we can learn from all walks of life. People who identify with a craft or with something, with a sport, with a game, with a relationship that they've committed to over decades, they all say it's about recommitting, returning, noticing that the recommitment is really what makes you identify as that thing. It's only the things we recommit to that we really identify as. Like if someone says, I'm a gamer, or if someone says, I'm a writer, or if someone says, I'm a podcast host, it's because there's a deep part of their spirit that not only chose that path, but kept choosing it and keeps showing up as the manifestation of that craft or of that area of life. That there's something about that part of the universe, that sphere of meaning, that they feel so called to that they're willing to put up with the obstacles and the detours and the deviations because that's who they are. You know, a writer isn't someone who writes every single day, not necessarily. A writer is someone who feels deeply committed to and devoted to the craft of writing, that feels that there's part of their being tied up with the process and the experience and maybe even the rewards of writing. So if you've come to something that you either maybe sometimes the avoidance is because we feel we're supposed to be that identity, but we haven't yet shown ourselves that we are that identity. Now, I don't believe in over-identifying as things or putting labels on ourselves, but sometimes it can be very hard, it can be very affirming to something we feel is true about ourselves, especially if it's something we've decided we are. rather than something someone else has decided. That's how I feel about calling myself an artist. No one called me that. There's no one in the universe who would have said, oh, you're an artist. I've decided through my own reflection and understanding how I move through the world and why I create what I create and how I see things and how I try to share what I see and what I learn with others, that I'm a motherfucking artist. And I define that for myself. And so each time that I recommit to that path where I have nothing to prove, but sometimes I just want to show myself, I feel like I deepen and expand myself as an artist. But to me, being an artist is not even this, it's just a way of being in the world. There's nothing you have to produce to be one. But being a podcast host, for example, that's a new identity that I do feel I want to show myself that I really am this. And I'm showing myself that by doing this, by confronting resistance in this episode and by taking time off, but then coming back and noticing that I'm going to probably take time off in the future, but then I'm going to hopefully come back. And if I don't, then that's maybe because now I became not a podcast host, and that's totally fine. I want to say with this idea of returning, that returning is a brave act. I want to say that. When you're writing something and you leave it for a while, the fact that you chose to return to it, it's a brave act. Because what has happened? Well, first of all, the piece hasn't gone in the direction that you were expecting. You were maybe expecting it to be out in the world by now, or you were expecting it to be finished by now, and it's not. But you're confronting that truth and you're saying, I'm still worthy of the return. I still have things to say. I'm reconnecting with the part of my consciousness that felt so called to write these words. And I'm saying, I still love you and I still honor you and I still see you and I want to recommit to you. Because it would be easy for you to just move on. And you can move on, everything in its time. But I think there's something really brave and delicious and exciting and beautiful and profound about choosing to return to something. The second reason I believe it's a brave act is we live in a culture of all or nothing thinking. You're either creating or you're not. You either are an artist or you are not. You either are a good friend or you are not. You either are committed to something or you are not. You're either being a consistent, disciplined artist or person or friend, or you're not. You are either on the path or you are not. But what happens when both are true? Because what happens when you have this binary is that when you see your behavior more reflected in the are not side, like if you either are an artist or you aren't, then when you aren't, you're like, oh, fuck, this is the side I deserve to be on. This is who I am now. It stops you from doing this dance of life, which is everything, everywhere, all at once, which is duality, which is complexity, which is contradiction. And it's not about being a good artist or a bad artist. It's about living a complex, rich, emotional life that has its seasons and has things, butterflies that take our attention that we just want to follow. And just life happens. So much is happening in your life. The fact that you recommit to creating space for your creativity is so profound and beautiful. So many shifts happen in the way that we live and move and work. The fact that you are trying to recommit to a friendship, that is so beautiful. In a world of disposability and the idea that once something is hard or difficult or inconvenient, we should just throw it away. The fact that you are choosing to come back in a world that's obsessed with consumption, with newness, with novelty. The fact that you're choosing to come back. It's brave and it's beautiful and precious. And I think it's stunning. It's stunning. What are we going to recommit to this week? And accept that this is not going to be the last week. It's an ongoing, never-ending journey. Once you decide something, like let's say you decide, I want to be a good friend. That's not a one-time decision. That's a decision that you're going to have to make in micro decisions again and again and again. You know, I want to be a committed friend. I want to be a committed artist. I want to be a committed creator. I want to be a committed musician. Because we are living a very dynamic life with many things pulling on our attention, the fact that you will, quote unquote, fall off this path of commitment, it's a given. It's not possible to have otherwise. And I think much of the self-help industry acknowledges this and feeds off of that because they feed off the shame we feel when we do fall off, sometimes for years. And it's not even falling off. You see how I've adopted the language that they have. We've lived a life. We've been complex beings. We've had seasons for things. Okay? We haven't fallen off. Excuse my social conditioning. So when you think in this binary way of either yes or no, when you fall to the side of no, you're like, oh, this is what I am. I'm a no. It's a no from me. Versus when you dance with the yes and no and you say, well, it's very complex. I want to dive deeper into this idea of the people in our lives and the shame we feel at the avoidance towards communicating with them. I once read this book called The Power of Regret because I was fascinated by that title. That's interesting to me. That's a paradigm shift. In what way should I be moving towards regret instead of away from it? And he says that the number one regret across cultures, ages, genders, people is lost connections. People regret that they lost touch with the people who were once and continue to be so meaningful to them, people that they loved, over meaningless conflicts that now mean nothing. They regret that later in life, they may feel lonely in ways that they know that they didn't need to. But because they didn't pick up the phone or they didn't have that difficult conversation, they lost the connection. They lost touch with someone. Isn't that powerful? Sit with that for a second, that's people's biggest regret on earth, is losing touch with people. And what does that mean for what we should be doing? I want to dive deeper into the actual experience of lost connection and the stages that occur. Because one of the critical stages is when we know it's been a long time and we feel a sense of shame and avoidance. And instead of focusing on the fact that if we send the text or if we make the phone call, this could reconnect us to that person for years and years, we hyperfixate on avoiding the discomfort of that initial reach out or text or call. That's a short-term mindset. It's saying in the short term, I will feel very uncomfortable if I confront this. Versus in the long term, I could have a lifetime of new memories with this person, new connections. And I know sometimes it's not up to us. Sometimes we're the ones that are left behind. Or sometimes someone, we lose touch for a deliberate reason. But I'm talking about this murky place where we could reconnect. Here's where we need to embrace the power of recommitment and the power of return. And I think what we're avoiding is sometimes also who we were when we knew that person. Maybe we've become a new person and we just feel disconnected from that version of ourselves. But then later in life, we realize, actually, I was creating a kind of false distance from that version of me. Like I still am that me. So we can also always return, like I said, returning to the writing, returning to the page, returning to a younger or a different version of ourselves who we now feel ourselves as no longer being. But we're not that static. We're not that singular. We're always very, very complex, and different people, different projects, different pieces within a project bring out different sides of us, different energies within us. The energy of this podcast episode is very different from the energy of the last, will be very different from the energy of the next. It's still my energy. So if you are listening to this and there's something you said you would do that you haven't done, and now you're not doing it because you feel ashamed that you said you would do it and you haven't done it, this is your sign from the universe. Forgive yourself and return when you're ready. If you're not ready now, that's okay. But know you are always worthy of returning, because I think worthiness and shame are so intimately connected. We don't feel worthy if our path isn't perfect, if our path isn't perfectly linear, consistent, and wonderful. We say, well, then I'm just not a good artist. I'm not a good creator. I'm not a good friend. I'm not worthy. That's this totalistic and dualistic frame of mind. It's so much more complex than just that. I would invite you to zoom out over the course of your life and think to yourself, okay, I took 6 months off. Okay, I took 6 years off. What about all the years on the other side? If you used to practice a language and you feel so ashamed for stopping, then you're also letting yourself be more focused on the time lost than the time that still lies ahead. This is where we have to invite in the idea that life is long. We have a lifetime to work on the things that we want to work on, but we deprive ourselves when we don't return and recommit, and also acknowledge that this won't be the first time or the second or the third, that the journey of deciding to align yourself to a craft or to a relationship, those are lifelong projects. Those are lifelong journeys. And so they necessarily involve the consistent choice to recommit. And so look at the universe gifting you with the ability to practice that much needed skill of return. Look at the universe, so generous. You get to practice sitting with the discomfort and the shame that you feel you've let yourself down in this time you've taken off. And you get to say, hey, universe, I'm back. And this is what we're going to be doing together, you and I, is we're going to keep returning. And that's just what the path is. The path is jaggedy and raggedy and all the things that it is. And it's like hills and mountains and valleys and ebbs and flows and cycles and orbits. And it's not perfectly linear or consistent. That is, again, the colonial imagination imposed on the dynamism and the contours and the complexity of the human experience, of the emotional human experience. You always have time to recommit. Always. You always have time to return. So I'm inviting you to return, babe. That thing that you've left behind, that you feel ashamed for leaving behind, that thing you said you do that you haven't been doing, that thing that you feel like not worthy of returning to because you said you would be this far by now and you're not that far. Let's return, babes. Let us return and focus on all that lies in front of us and next to us and behind us. Focus on, instead of looking, it's like we're in a forest and there's this petal. And instead of looking up and seeing the forest, we're hyper-focused on the petal. Okay, it's like our creativity is this, it's like there's a flower of our creativity so far. And we're in this forest. And instead of looking to the forest and all we could create and all we could be and all we could experience, we focus on the broken petal of the flower. Why is this petal broken? Oh no, I'm so unworthy because I broke the petal. No, you have a whole forest. There's a forest, there's abundance. And there's something about this timing and you doing it in this time frame, this reality, this society, this condition. There's something you've gained. There's something that's been enriched in your life, enlivened in you, that's going to allow you to bring a new energy, a new perspective, a new life force into what you're creating. And that makes this time off generative. It's always generative. We just have to choose to see it that way. They want us to think, oh, if we took 8 months off, we only lost. Because they think in algorithms, in numbers and in linearity, right? But we don't have to think like that. We do, just because we live in a platform society that wants analytics and measurements and consistency and growth, it doesn't mean we have to subject our beings as complex members of the natural world, of the universe, of nature. We don't have to squeeze our meaning and our worthiness into this linearity and into this obsession with quantification of self. You cannot be quantified. You cannot be measured. Okay? You are always worthy of honoring your calling, forgetting about it, and then returning to it, babe. And then deciding to return to it once more. I am on this journey with you this week. I'm recommitting to TikTok. I have not consistently posted on TikTok in a very long time. And I'm recommitting to her this week. And I'm going to recommit again because I'm going to stop again because it's a stressful thing to do. But I love myself and I'm worthy and I'm not what I create and you're not what you create. We are not what we create. But when we feel called to create, we are worthy of that creation. There's no vision you have that there's not a version of it. It doesn't have to be the exact version in your head, but that there's no version of it that couldn't exist in the world. That's something I also want you to take from me. If you have this grand vision for something, you also have to remember a dream is an illusion. And so we don't have to stick to the exact form of the dream. We just need to use it as a beacon to light us and shine the way and shine a way towards that dream and know that what will actually transpire is probably going to look very different. But yeah, honor your calling. You are worthy. You are divine. I love you. I'm sending you love. You've got this, whatever this is. And if your break is not over, if you're not ready to return, that's fine. That's okay. I hope that you take care of yourself. I hope that you nurture yourself. I hope that you create from a place of wholeness, knowing that you are whole and knowing that you can never do anything to remove yourself from the fact that you are a member of the universe. And as such, you are divine. And as such, you are magnificent, magical, mystical, delicious. Okay? Okay. I hope some paradigms have been shifted for you in today's conversation. As always, if you can, please leave a 5-star rating on Apple and Spotify. Like, comment, subscribe. I love you so, so much. Okay? I love you. Join me on my Substack. Links in the comment section. Go there. Okay? Love you so much. Love you. Bye.